The Trap Set will always be available for free, but we rely on donations from our listeners. Please visit our website at thetrapset.net and click Donate. Subscribe to our show on iTunes, and if you enjoy what you hear, give us a review.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I want to play something for you. You're hearing Out and About by Dietrich and Barnes, featuring my guest, Jeremy Barnes, on drums. The band, which also features Deerhoof's John Dietrich on guitar, is just one of Jeremy's many creative outlets. For 15 years, he's played accordion and percussion in A Hawk and a Hacksaw, a folk duo with his wife, violinist Heather Trost. He played drums on the first album by popular rock band Beirut. He composes music for an Albanian TV show. He's currently scoring Forest of Sleep, a video game loosely based on Russian fairy tales, and he co-founded his own label, LM Duplication. Jeremy began his career 20 years ago when he joined Neutral Milk Hotel, the band for which he is perhaps best known. Neutral Milk Hotel was popular with critics, but struggled to find an audience during its initial existence, leading to a hiatus in 1999. In the intervening years, however, the band's audience grew exponentially, and many consider 1998's In the Aeroplane Over the Sea a classic album. I spoke to Jeremy at the tail end of Neutral Milk Hotel's highly anticipated reunion tour last year. And now our conversation with Jeremy Barnes.
I remember early on seeing, like on PBS, seeing footage of Gene Krupa playing and being really struck with how amazing it was. And then I was lucky that I had an older brother who was getting into music earlier, and he really influenced me. You know, I could hear what he was listening to across the hall. And he got really into like all this great stuff early on. Like, you know, in 6th grade, he was turning me on to like The Who and stuff, and he bought like videotapes of them, and I saw Keith Moon, and there was this connection I could see between Gene Krupa and Keith Moon, and that's around the time that I really started thinking like I'd love to do that. It just seems like it would be the funnest thing ever, and other instruments didn't really get me like that. There was something about the physicality of it, and it's very, you know, and it ties in somewhat with, in some ways I wonder if I was intrigued by it, coming from like the background of being pushed to play sports and stuff, and like drumming is a physical thing, you know.
You could say it's a masculine instrument in
yeah,
some
and
context.
Especially, and if you see someone like Gene Krupa who there's like a lot of flair and there's a lot of body movement, and he's I mean, it can be feminine too, and there,
of course.
But what I was at that time, I was looking at. I mean, the perspective that I had on drummers was, you know, like, you know, Keith Moon. I mean, I wasn't interested in, like when I first got my drum kit, I was learning on my own, completely just autodidactic, and things like the hi-hat. It just seemed like, what's the point of this hi-hat? I remember seeing videos of the Eagles where Don Henley's playing the hi-hat, and comparing that into my mind, like videos of The Who where Keith Moon's just like washing the ride cymbal, and I'm thinking, why is he doing that? It sounds like a metronome. It doesn't sound good. Like, it didn't, for some reason, like as a kid, and even to now I have problems with the hi-hat, but as a kid I just didn't like the hi-hat. I wanted it to be this crazy, like, masculine sort of, you know, I guess I was looking for the most over-the-top kind of insane sound, which is not even necessarily masculine, but there is like volume to it. But, you know, I just always loved like the washing of the ride cymbal and like kind of chaotic elements that, you know, a lot of like Mitch Mitchell and to some extent, I mean, Ginger Baker. I grew up with like this sort of listening to those British drummers. Like those were the thing for me from the moment I got interested in drums. It was like Keith Moon, Ginger Baker, Mitch Mitchell, and John Bonham. But it was really the late '60s style of British drumming was like, to me, just it was it.
So you mentioned you have one older brother.
Yeah.
Do you have where do you fall in the
just two kids.
family?
I'm the
It's
youngest.
just you and your older brother.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
became a Marine.
Yeah, but he was really into punk rock. I mean, like I said, he turned me on to the Circle Jerks, and he wrote a letter. He had a Circle Jerks record from like 1981, and on the back was a Circle Jerks fan club, and he sent them a letter trying to join. And this is in like 1991. Of course, the fan club had ceased to exist, and so we got the letter back, and it arrived at our house, and my dad checked the mail, and it was return to sender, Circle Jerks fan club, and he'd never heard of the band.
Had he heard of the term Circle Jerk?
Yes. He came into the living room, and he's like, "This arrived in the mail today. Does someone want to explain what's going on?"
So did you have pressure to become a Marine?
No, because they gave up. I think the nice thing is, like I say, I was in eighth grade, I just abandoned everything, and it was hard to go through that. And my dad was upset with me for quitting basketball, and he was very upset with me, and it really bugged him that I wanted to be a musician, and it was kind of a thing that we fought about, and even way after I ended up dropping out of college to join Neutral Milk Hotel, and we had no money, and it was really hard for him to, it was always a problem, really.
Who do you mean we? The band?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the band had no money it was just the first few years of the band, everybody was in kind of dire poverty. And
do you ever hear your dad's voice in your mind and like second guess yourself?
No, not really. If I love my dad, I respect him, but we're on different paths.
Why do you think that he objected to that path? Was it more of like a stability thing, a financial thing, or did he object to the entire lifestyle and ideology?
Yeah, I think he did, and it was the financial thing. And he was always thinking, it's like a cult. You're gonna become a drug addict. All the worst.
The Marines is kind of like a cult.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by Colectivo Coffee, handmade coffee since 1993. Check them out online at colectivo.com.
Did you guys have like Semper Fi bumper stickers on your family car and stuff?
No, it was more subtle than that. We never did have that. And if anything, we didn't. I mean,
was your dad in combat at any point?
No.
Is your brother still serving right now?
No, he's not. He's happily not. Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, the Marines, they're not gung-ho, we are Marines, but I think it does affect everybody, being in the military. And, it's one path to choose. And it's just something that I thought for myself, I don't want to do that. I want to try and play music, and I knew it was a big risk, and it was going to create problems with my family, but it worked out. And that, it worked out in the way that my dad he understands me now, and he respects what I do. And it's, actually one of the nicest things about the tour that we've done in the last year and a half was we played in Dallas, and my dad came down from Albuquerque, and I was really worried about him being able to see the drums, because there's it's like sometimes hard with the sight lines and everything. And so somebody was like, well, he can just sit on stage. We'll just get him a chair. And so they sat him directly just stage right, right at eye level with me. And it reminded me, because he used to coach my basketball, and it reminded me of like him watching me as I was playing basketball, you know.
That's really great.
It was he'd never really watched me play drums. I mean, he had heard me, you know, practice, but he'd never actually sat down and like, all right, I'm going to watch an hour's worth of you playing, and that.
Did you want him to when you were younger?
No, because he was so anti, you know. No, I didn't. It was, you know, like I say, like it was two different paths. And
My parents were very supportive, and they would have liked to have seen me play when I was younger, but
yeah, you didn't want them there.
I didn't want them there.
Yeah, in some ways it makes it easier if they don't want to be there.
I think it gave me a lot of anxiety, and
Yeah.
I think I also just created a narrative in my head that I didn't think they would like what I was doing anyway.
And
they
you
probably wouldn't. But
Yeah, and you probably feel restrained, like not really like how it's hard to be who you are or try to. I think it's hard to express yourself when you have someone like that around. And I think about it if
I think if you're confident with who you are as a person, you
Yeah.
should be able to. But I'm sure that I wasn't at the time.
Sure, when
as
you're a
teenager.
kid, you're trying to work stuff out, and your band might suck. That doesn't, but you know, everybody goes through that. But to have parents at every show, I think about that. If I'm ever a parent, am I gonna? I feel like in some ways it was a blessing that I had to fight, and I had to like really decide like this is what I want to do, no matter what happens. You know, my parents are gonna. You know, they basically said when I left college, they were like, yeah, fine, but, you know, don't come asking for any money. Don't ask for anything from us.
Did you ever have to ask them for money?
No, but I had no money at all. And, you know,
So what did you do?
Well, I mean, I moved to New York to join up with Jeff and everybody in the band. And
How did you meet Jeff?
I met Jeff through Julian, who plays in Neutral Milk Hotel. He was on tour with another band. He came through Albuquerque, and my band opened for them when I was still in high school. And we kept in touch, and he initially was like, oh, I really want you to join this band of Montreal that my friend is starting. They're really great. And
That's a different Barnes.
Yeah, no relation. And he was like, they're really great. You should join this band. And I would talk to Kevin on the phone about the band. And it never happened. And then Julian...
Were you interested in it?
I'd never heard... Yeah, he sent me some demos, and it was like confusing music, but very interesting creatively. I think it wouldn't have worked out for either of us, but yeah, I it was interesting. But yeah, Julian I moved on and went to college, and I was a freshman.
You went to college in Chicago?
Yeah, at DePaul.
Okay.
And
what were you studying?
I didn't really know. I moved there because I wanted to check out the Chicago music scene. And I remember the day I arrived, I took the train from Albuquerque. I got off the train, and I was walking around, and I was thinking, I really, really want to find a band and quit school and go on tour by the end of this year. And that's what happened. It was so lucky.
Is it lucky, or do you place any credence in the concept that when you really put your intentions out there, that sometimes
I guess
they come back?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean,
have you observed that kind of thing happening in other instances in your life?
Occasionally, but there's always those little special periods where you're just like something. It's like you're banging your head against the wall for a long time, and then finally you hit a spot and it opens, and you know what I mean. And that's kind of and with Julian, I mean, you know, he sort of disappeared, and then one day he called me up, got my number from my parents, and said, I'm coming to Chicago next week with my friend Jeff. We want you to try out for this band that he's leading. And they just arrived off. It was crazy. I mean, they just arrived and stayed with me, and we.
When was this? Mid-90s?
Yeah, it was 1990. It was like January of '96.
Okay.
And so they arrived, and we played, and at the end of their little stay, I was thinking, that was so cool. Like, these guys are doing it. It's so inspiring. I hope I can do it one day. I hope I can. It's just cool to meet people who are doing, Jeff was just about to release on Avery Island. He had the test pressing, and And then at the end, he was like, why don't you come to New York with us, and we're going to tour this summer and, play with us.
Did the music speak to you right away?
Yeah. And, talking to Jeff, the great thing is he's a drummer, and he had the same...
Did he play drums on the album?
Yeah. He had the same feeling about hi-hats as me. We had this talk about hi-hats one of the days, why do drummers always play the hi-hat? Why can't they just... We just talked about we talked about the recording of Helter Skelter, the sound of the ride cymbal. It's so compressed. It's like an atmosphere. It's its own atmosphere of just,
right. It's like a drone.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about the way, heavy distortion can mix in with that and create this very strange. Jeff is really into drones and really into kind of atmospheric sound.
Today's episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by our good friends at Revival Drum Shop. Revival is community-oriented, and they feature a one-of-a-kind collection of vintage and handmade custom drums, eclectic percussion, lessons, and rentals. They're truly one of the great drum shops of the world, and you can check them out the next time you're in Portland, Oregon, or online at revivaldrumshop.com.
Was it difficult to make the decision to leave school?
No, it wasn't. When he said, "Do you want to come?" the decision was made, basically. The hard part was telling my parents, I'm leaving.
What do you think they found in you?
I don't know. They tried other drummers, and I think, again, it goes back to maybe Jeff and I have the same kind of taste in drums. He doesn't want... he's pretty good about letting me do what I want, but, we just kind of fit in together. And I often think I don't, especially at that time, I'm not sure that there were many bands that I could really work with. It really kind of fit in a strange way, and nobody was expecting that. In the beginning, Julian was saying, just, play like Mo Tucker, just do real simple stuff. Mm-hmm. And I love Mo Tucker, and that would be cool. But Jeff was like, no, let's do this. And so... it all kind of evolved. It took us a while. We moved to New York, and we had 3 months to put the band together and go on tour, and it took some time to get it going.
Where was everybody else living before you moved to New York?
Julian was in New York City. Jeff was in Denver, and Scott was in Austin living in a van, working at a pizza parlor. And I'd never met Scott. We all just moved to New York together and lived in Julian's grandma's house.
For free?
Yeah, we rehearsed in her basement and lived there.
Where was her house? Queens or something?
Close. It's at New Hyde Park, just outside of Queens.
Okay.
Yeah, and it culturally, it's a desert. It's crazy. It's just like strip mall after strip mall of bagel places and diners. Nothing. But the cool thing was Julian was living in the West Village, so we could go there. Yeah.
You could go there when you wanted to be around some...
Yeah.
Rich bohemians.
Exactly. And then the early...
How come he had a place in the West Village?
He had this crazy rent control apartment through his uncle they had it since the 50s, and in the mid 90s it was coming to an end. So he was paying $300 a month for a walk-in
that is great.
Closet. Yeah. And he had filled it with I stayed there, Scott stayed there. He had to...
Wait, you said he was paying for a walk-in closet?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
There was no kitchen. But it was amazing. So we all stayed there off and on. People were crashing there all the time.
Did you get a job?
I tried so hard. And it's funny because the one job that I nearly got was at Bleecker Bob's Records.
Uh-huh.
The manager was into the fact that I was staying in the West Village, and he said, "Yeah, I'll call you." And then 2 weeks later, one of the guys who was staying at Julian's was like, "Oh yeah, the Bleecker Bob's guy called you about a week ago," and I tried like Subway. But the thing is, we were touring and we weren't. It's funny. I could not get a job to save my life, and it was really sad. But we were gone. We were gone. So, and it probably wouldn't have worked anyway. But it just meant like there was no money for me.
But then, how did you survive?
Well, there was some money. Basically, like a little bit of. I didn't have to pay for any accommodation. It was basically just food. That was it.
So the money would come from shows, and then you would split it up and eat with that?
Yeah, there was never... We didn't really have a booking agent. Nobody really knew how to get shows in New York. The record had just come out and,
Were you able to get unemployment or something like that?
No, I didn't try. I didn't try to get unemployment. I was basically just kind of like bumming money when I could, or, Jeff would get... I mean, I'm sure he paid for quite a few meals, but
Did it feel fun since you were young and like there's
it wasn't
this like
that
romantic
fun, no.
notion?
I liked the idea of the romantic notion, but it wasn't. I mean,
in practice,
it
it's not that
nearly
fun.
like there was times when I felt like a homeless person. Like I'm just gonna sit in the park all day because I have no money and nowhere to go. And I mean, what are you gonna do? And I was too young to go to bars. I didn't know anybody. I was sort of...
Were you into drinking at the time?
I would have been, yeah, I guess, if I had money and access. But I don't know. I was shy, and we were in our little bubble.
Did you feel like you were able to carve out like a creative space in which to function in the band?
Yeah, definitely. And again, going back to like Jeff and I kind of coming from the same place as drummers, yeah, and he was really, he gave me freedom to do what I wanted. And sometimes too much freedom. But I do think that, as the band began to establish an identity with everyone involved, I think it affected his songwriting in some ways where there were certain songs that were written for Scott to play horns or Julian to play saw. He was thinking of the drums, what I would do on songs, so I think it helped us all. We just kind of somewhere in there became a band,
It's interesting because the older that you get, this kind of phenomenon becomes even more apparent. But, you started playing drums when you were in 8th grade, so you were 13, 14.
Yeah.
Then by the time you're 19, 6 years
I know.
later,
it's weird to
you're
think about
touring.
now. Yeah.
And like if you think back to 5 years ago and today, your life probably didn't have as much of a shift as it did then.
Yeah.
At least like as a drummer.
Right.
So was there a point when you felt like you came into your own and you felt really confident?
Yeah, I think there was a point in high school where I felt like, okay, I've got it. I think I'm getting better, basically. I felt, in the first few years I was struggling to understand things. But I think there have been, it's a gradual process where I still feel like I'm learning. I think everybody feels that way, where you just learn all the way through. Hopefully, there are moments at least. It's not all the time, but I feel like every once in a while I put something new together, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Why didn't I think about that before?
The second Neutral Milk Hotel record happens. You recorded on it.
Yeah.
Were you proud of how it turned out?
It was a hard process because, again, it goes back to we had no money for recording. We had a very talented producer in Robert Schneider who could do a lot with very little. But we recorded the drums in a tiny space. I had very little amount of time to put the drums together. We had not been playing together. I went back to school for like 9 months while Jeff was sort of incubating and Julian was doing other things and Scott was doing other things. We all met back in Denver and basically after having no rehearsal, we just went into the studio and started recording, did the drums first.
Was there a noticeable change in popularity after the album came out?
There was an uptick for sure. It was but it gradually kind of went, and at the same time, friends of ours were doing much better, like the Apples and Olivia. But we did get to go to Europe, and we had like great shows in Sweden, which was strange, seemed crazy. And then just as things were beginning to really uptick is when we stopped. So, and then from there, I think when we stopped, the fact that we stopped and people kept wondering when we're going to do something, we did, and then it just kind of crept up and up and up, you know.
Right. So absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, in a weird way, and nobody was expecting that, and that was not the plan at all. You know,
what was the plan?
There was no plan. It was just that, yeah, there was and is no plan. To this day, there is no plan.
Why did you stop?
There's no. I mean, I think basically.
What was the conversation?
There was no conversation at all. I mean, everybody was going in different directions in some ways, and I think Jeff was burnt on touring and doing the things that he thought he needed to do, like give interviews and stuff. And Julian wanted to focus more on his project. And if anything, I was the person who was like taking the thing that he loved and like, you know, clenching it, and you know, like I couldn't. I was the one who, I think I was like the youngest one who like really identified with the band and didn't want it to stop. But it, you know, it worked out because we all, even through what happened, which wasn't that bad, we all stayed friends and stayed in touch.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So your identity was wrapped up in this band. You left school to do the band.
Yeah.
You didn't really know what you were going to do afterwards.
Yeah.
And, you know, you saw your friends' bands doing well and thought, hey, this could be me. Let's push it further. Let's see how far we could take this. Now, like, in hindsight, you're saying, well, I was the young one who was clenching on what I loved.
Yeah.
But at the time, how did you feel?
When the band stopped?
Yeah.
Just like kind of out to sea without a boat or anything. Just kind of lost, you know, wondering what to do. And from there I moved to France and England, and I gave up for a while playing drums, and I learned the accordion. And now the accordion is like...
Were you studying accordion with somebody?
No, I just taught myself.
What were you doing to get by?
Well, the funny thing is around about that time, we started to get a little bit of a trickle from royalties. So I was able to just, again, I figured out a way to, I was with a girl and I didn't have to pay for accommodation again. So
there you go.
So
a French lady?
She was half French, half English.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we lived in France and then England for a while, and then...
How long were you with her?
I was with maybe 5 years, and while I was in England,
I have a question. Did you ever feel like you were trapped in this situation because you were relying on her for lodging?
Well, it changed. We got married, and then I got a job. I worked as a mailman in France. In England. I worked as a mailman, so
So you became a citizen?
Yeah. At that time, I was recording on doing stuff on my own and playing with this band called Broadcast. And so I did that, and worked as a mailman.
Did you have kids?
No, fortunately. So we broke up, and then I came home, and I don't know. It the personal stuff gets tangled up, but
what happened?
Oh, I mean, I was on tour, and just stuff happened back home that it was, you know.
She found somebody.
Yeah,
else?
Basically while I was gone, and so I moved out.
Did that mess you up for a long time?
Oh yeah. But it worked out for the best in the end, because I went home to Albuquerque thinking, what the hell am I going to do in New Mexico? This place is a dump. And then I realized all this like rootlessness of the last however many years I'd been gone, 7 years. I realized this is home. This is what I love. And I met my now wife there, who plays violin. So suddenly she's, you know, we're talking about Bela Bartok, and she, you know, playing Hungarian and Romanian music together on violin and accordion. So it was like I went into a different kind of world away from the drums.
Do you have ambitions for the future? Do you have a plan?
Well, I mean, it's a confusing time for music and releasing records, but that's what I love doing, is releasing records and playing music. So I want to
Confusing
continue.
in what sense?
It's not. I feel like the way I looked at it, the way I learned to look at it as a kid has changed. The way people are kind of listening to music is changing, and I'm beginning to feel like I have sort of an antiquated view of records. I think of a record almost like a book. You put it on and you listen to the whole thing, and you find those few records you really love. And I don't really shuffle on the iPad, and I don't, or whatever, on the iPhone. I mean,
I guess the way I look at it is it's cycling back to the era before LPs.
It's like 45.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then maybe it'll cycle back to the era before recorded music altogether.
Yeah, it could. That would be interesting. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
not that the technology won't exist, but maybe live performances will become more important.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, it is happening. I think live performances are more important now than they used to be.
Yeah, in some ways.
Yeah.
Although I do think that, recorded versions of material is still looked upon by lots of people as kind of like the definitive version.
Yes.
Whereas in the past,
which is, yeah,
it was a snapshot of
Yeah.
a particular performance of a song.
right. It is true. Yeah.
All we need to do is like master this new paradigm and we'll both be rich.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
We just have to put that intention out there in the universe, man.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Joe. It's
Okay.
a pleasure to be on your show.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.